right, good morning. This is Traditions and Encounters, Chapter 25, Part 2, Notes, and I am sick. So we're going to try to get through this. I'm going to use the mute button so I don't cough into the mic, because that's not fun for anybody. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the Americas in the early colonial period. This is Part 2. If you haven't watched Part 1, you're behind. Get your butt in order. All right, economic changes. So Western Europeans who went to the Americas were pretty much motivated by profit. Example, on his first voyage, Columbus was convinced that the island of Hispaniola, which is the name he gave to what we now call Haiti and Dominican Republic, he was convinced there was going to be gold all over it, but there wasn't. And so he's like, well, I have to come home with something that's worth something. So instead he and his crew kidnapped the locals and took them back to Spain as slaves. Ugh. Yeah, hashtag douchebag. In the early 1500s, the Spanish established a coercive labor system called the encomienda system to gain access to the gold and other resources of the Encomenderos, ooh, look at my poor accent, or landowners really, forced the indigenous people to work for them in exchange for food and shelter, which is something they were providing for themselves previously anyways. But this coercive or slave labor system was notorious for its brutality and harsh living conditions, and essentially just it was slavery. Well, they didn't find the gold that they wanted in the New World. They did find silver in Mexico and Peru, and that was able to revive the fortune of Spain, not just of the individual conquistadors, but that of the country. They created new developments in mining, some of them really awful, like the use of mercury to separate silver from the ore, made the mining industry grow much, much faster. By the end of the 16th century, the cities of Zacatecas in Mexico, and especially Potosi in the Andes Mountains in Peru today, became centers of silver mining. In order for this industry to flourish, Spanish needed more and more labor. They forced the natives to do all but the most dangerous work in the mines. In response, Spanish authorities in Peru transformed the traditional Incan system called mita, which is a labor obligation that you used to owe to the emperor, which is also basically slavery, and use that to create their labor force. Young men were required to devote a certain amount of labor to public works projects. Previously, now you had to give that labor in the mines. Villages were forced to send a percentage of their male population to do the dangerous work in the mines for literally no money. Some parents maimed or blinded their kids to save them from going into the mines. All right, so the silver trade not only made individual Spanish prospectors wealthy, but it also made Spain wealthy. Again, European powers at the time were adopting a policy called mercantilism, which is an economic system that increased government control of the economy through high tariffs and the establishment of colonies. You claim the land that you settled by in the country, and that doesn't make sense. You claim the land that you settled in your colony for the home country. So in the case of Spain, the main purpose of the colonies of the Americas was to supply as much gold and silver as possible. They weren't interested in improving the lives of anybody or making it a place people wanted to go. Didn't matter. Another way to increase national wealth, according to the mercantilist system, was for a colonizing country to export more than it imports. So you're selling more than you're bringing in. A percentage of overseas silver production went directly to the Spanish crown. The empire would use this wealth to build an impressive military and to establish trade with foreign lands. China. China was a very enthusiastic consumer of the silver from the Americas. Mexican silver, for example, makes its way across the Pacific Ocean to East Asia in these big, huge, crazy, heavily armed Spanish ships known as galleons. And they make stops in the Philippines. They stop in a trading post in Manila, which is why they were called Manila galleons, and they exchange that silver for luxury goods like silks and spices, etc. Cough again. Okay. It's those massive Manila galleons that allowed trade to flourish. The Chinese government soon began using silver as its main form of currency. By the early 17th century, silver had become the dominant force in the global economic system. Meanwhile, back in Portugal, the Portuguese Empire would focus its endeavors on agriculture. They're going to focus their economy on crops. Brazil, which is the center of the Portuguese American Empire, had a nice tropical climate and vast tracts of land, was perfect, sadly, for sugarcane. As disease had just destroyed the indigenous population, however, there's not enough laborers to work in the fields. In response, the Portuguese began to import enslaved people from Africa, especially from the Kingdom of Congo and the cities on the Swahili coast. The conditions on these plantations were horrific. Every single year, 5 to 10% of the labor force would die. But as long as Portugal kept making money, they just kept going. Spain notices, hey, Portugal's making some money off this. Maybe we should do this as well. And they start to pursue land for cash crops like sugar and tobacco. All right, let's make some connections. In your notebook, after these notes, I want you to create a Venn diagram. Circles, circles. Comparing and contrasting Spain and Portugal's colonial empire. Hey, look, I made it, and I didn't die. Awesome.